Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan. His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 3 Brief California Interlude 1947 to 1950. When the skyline of New York became visible, I was filled with excitement and expectancy. Zulfi recalled, "We saw the Statue of Liberty and took pride in it because it personified liberty. And for our naive minds, freedom had the connotation of unrestricted and unfettered right of the individual to live free and unmolested." Zulfi reveled in the nightlife of New York, in the movie houses, restaurants, and bars around Times Square and along Broadway. But after a week, he headed west to Los Angeles. By the time he reached Los Angeles, Zulfi sorely missed his servants. He shared a room with his cricket-loving buddy, Omar Qureshi, in Bess Jones's rooming house on South Flower Street, just a few blocks from USC campus. Sechawala, a composer and now professor of music living in Glendora, also lived there, where room and board cost just $13.50 a week. Sechawala vividly recalls Zulfi's first cry from the top of the stairs, outside the bathroom door. "Who down there is going to draw my bath?" Much of Zulfi's daily life in his new home came to this spoiled scion of Sindhi aristocracy as a rude awakening. Though Nazism and fascism had been defeated abroad, racial prejudice were still alive throughout the United States. Zulfi had always considered himself to be a member of the top crust of Indo-Pakistani society. Suddenly, he found himself being treated on campus and off as a Mex or nigger. The only interracial off-campus fraternity at the time was the night school's Kappa Alpha Psi, which Zulfi joined under Sechawala's brotherhoodly sponsorship. Because there was no cricket being played at USC, Zulfi and Omar signed up for tennis, at which both excelled. The abundant nightclubs along the Sunset Strip and their risky girly shows provided much more entertainment than the relatively tame clubs of Bombay. Zulfi dated many women in California. He was by nature singularly passionate, and finding himself so liberated from all social and familial constraints, quickly lost whatever inhibitions he may have felt in Bombay or Larkana. None of his new friends had any idea, of course, that he was married. Slim and handsome, he had grown a dark Gable-type mustache, was endowed with a full head of wavy hair, and always dressed Nattily. He was quite the dapper rake. Zulfi dated Margaret, an art major who later would become Sechawala's first wife. She subsequently confided to her husband that she had found Zulfi much too impatient with women. He'd always left her dissatisfied, and she soon came to feel that their relationship was meaningless to him. It was a not uncommon female complaint about the swift sexuality of adolescent males, hardly unique to Zulfi. Yet what was unusual perhaps is how often, how long, and how late in Zulfi's life that pattern of instant passionate desire and equally sudden loss of interest in its object seems to have persisted. Did that never resolved ambivalence towards women reflect perhaps the instant gratification of love his mother's ever-present breast and tender hand had always provided him during his purposely prolonged infancy, clashing with his mature consciousness of guilt at still somatically needing such succor? Sechawala also introduced Zulfi to Mary Ellen, a hometown friend who was a widow in her early 30s, with two small girls, when Zulfi dated her. He liked coming to her apartment for dinner, dressed in Indian costume, feeling perhaps as if he were almost in Larkana during family evenings, especially because Mary Ellen was so much older, like Amir Begum. Zulfi, who was just over 20, tried to pass himself off to Mary as 25 or 27. Thanks to his mustache, physical precocity, and English accent, she readily believed him. Anne Reynolds was another of his girlfriends, as was Lily Bakhtiar, with whom he loved to walk on the Santa Monica beach. He said he would like to marry me, Dr. Bakhtiar, now an eminent physician, recalled. And it was a very unusual kind of proposal because there had not been any kind of intimacy. To demonstrate his sincerity, Zulfi gave her a very beautiful watch and a sari. He seems to have felt more tender towards her because she was Persian and he had this fervor of pan-Islamism. He often talked of his dream of turning a unified bloc of all Islamic nations into a major force against the great powers. Bakhtiar was only 18 at the time and it scared me, she remembered. He was so fanatical about it. Zulfi never declared a major during the 2 years he spent working towards a bachelor's degree at USC, but he took as many political science courses as possible and joined the debating team. He argued in a debate in early February of 1948 that as a citizen of the world, I consider it my solemn duty to try and convince people that our salvation lies in one world. He was impressed by Wendell Willkie's global consciousness, and his bright mind tried to integrate all the new things he was experiencing with the image worlds of Larkana, Karachi, and Bombay that he carried in his genes and head. For the sake of humanity, Zulfi reasoned, let us re-examine without prejudice the norm of our politics. Let us close the bloody chapters of war and engage ourselves in harmonizing our people. Let us erase from our minds the crazy nation-centric notion leading to fanaticism and intolerance. He passionately prayed that the weapon of our one world will not be the atomic bomb, but the weapon of love, and the creed should be that the simplicity which Prophet Muhammad expounded so effectively in the deserts of Arabia. On 1st April 1948, Zulfi spoke at USC of the Islamic heritage as one of my own accomplishments, for I genuinely consider any accomplishment of the Islamic people as a personal feat, just as I consider a failure of the Muslim world as a personal failure. There is something binding about the Muslim world, in spite of the fact that it is torn by dissension. I am not a devout Muslim. My interest is soaked in the political, economic, and cultural heritage of Islam. He then gave a brief exposition of the early history and doctrinal development of the Islamic faith and its spread the world over. Our position is pathetically unstable, Zulfi continued, reflecting perhaps his own condition. Imperialism has sapped our vitality and drained our blood in every part of the globe. The young generation of Muslims, who will be the leaders of a new force of an order based on justice, wants the end of exploitation. Under an Islamic confederation, the future world, at least the disciples of Muhammad, would be more secure. Destiny demands an Islamic association. Political reality justifies it. Posterity awaits it. And by God we will have it. Courage is in our blood. We are the children of a rich heritage. We shall succeed. Zulfi often told his roommates that when he went back to Pakistan, he would start a pan-Islamic league. Then it dawned on me later, Chechuela reflected that this guy really likes power. He enjoyed the thought of being in charge. Zulfi often spoke of Jinnah to his friends, saying, "That's my man. That's my idol, the man I respect." Not that any of them, except Umar, had ever heard of Pakistan or of Jinnah. Zulfi was a keen fraternity brother, initiated by hanging inside a dark potato sack for half an hour next to other initiates, shouting, "Hey, what's going on?" As a new member, he was expected to do the usual dirty work. On the eve of the school's annual football game with the University of California, Los Angeles, Zulfi, Chechuela, and Joe Phillips, who drove the getaway car, ventured into UCLA's new campus in what was then quite Westwood Village. Zulfi and Chechwela's job was to paint outhouse on any UCLA walls that they found. Then, racing toward the waiting car, Zulfi tossed his paint can and reddened brush into UCLA's fountain. The three miscreants broke every traffic law as they sped home. Philo Moody spent several weekends with Zulfi. The New Year's Day Rose Bowl game and Parade of Roses in Pasadena were exhilarating to the two students. Zulfi returned those visits, venturing north to Berkeley, where he happened to be just after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination on 30th January 1948. Young Philo felt fatherless, countryless, and creedless. And it was quite some time before I could bring the tears and sobs under control. Zulfi consoled me and nursed me out of my condition, sharing my sorrow. Pillow recalled, adding that when Jinnah died 8 months later, I did the same for him. Shortly after Jinnah's death in September 1948, Zulfi wrote to M.A. Isfahani, Pakistan's first ambassador to Washington, one of Jinnah's closest friends. We have been orphaned at this crucial moment when we needed more than any other force the torrential magnanimity of our beloved leader. Though the Qaid is no longer with us, yet his pure and virgin spirit will remain forever fertile in our minds. His entire life was a struggle for the betterment and emancipation of his people. Zulfi spent some time during his summer holidays as a volunteer in the Pakistan Embassy in Washington. One of the papers he wrote there dealt with the man he revered. Jinnah is solely responsible for the creation of a state for those whom he led in the struggle for the emancipation of their lives. His dream of creating a Pakistan has been a great dream. The realization of his dream has been nothing short of a miracle, for it has been an achievement carried out single-handedly. He has led a people who were thoroughly derelict and disunited and depressed. He has been a God inspired man, a man of purity of heart, of an unbelievable audacity and a unique courage and determination. Attempts would be made by Zia's regime in several of the white papers published after Bhutto's arrest, as they had been by Ayub Khan's martial government a decade earlier, to discredit Zulfi Bhutto by insisting he continued to think of himself as an Indian citizen all the time he spent in the United States and Britain. But the assertions were obviously untrue. He did try to receive fair payment for his father's Bombay property in a High Court petition filed after returning home. But much of his time in the United States was spent seeking to educate his friends and community groups about Pakistan and its significance for the modern world. I will not forgive you for not knowing where my country is, Zulfi told the Ventura Country American Association of University Women when speaking at its international program. It is your duty to know where every tiny island in the world is located if you are to play your rightful part in this world. The newspaper account of the talk reported that Bhutto felt it would have been wiser to unite India, but that the seeds of British imperialism were so deeply inculcated that an honest compromise was impossible. There is some strife between India and Pakistan, but all countries go through that. It should be known to all that Pakistan will go along with all nations interested in world peace. We have a great destiny and are proud of it. Most Americans, even USC professors who should have known better, were quite confused about India and Pakistan 40 odd years ago. Diplomatic historian T. Walter Walbank wrote in October 1948 that one of my students from India, Mr. Z. A. Bhutto, has been in my history classes for a period of 1 year. I would say that this young man is definitely a superior scholar, perhaps even in the brilliant category. 2 months later, the head of the Department of Political Science, Wilbert L. Hindman, wrote in support of Zulfi's reapplication to Oxford's Christ Church College, attesting his improving academic record and superior potentialities as a student. After 2 years at USC, however, Zulfi's average was lower than B. He would not be admitted to Oxford later after he completed his degree with honors in political science at the University of California, Berkeley campus in June 1950. For his 21st birthday on 5th January 1949, Zulfi received two literary gifts from his father, then living in Larkana: a leather-bound 5-volume set of William Sloane's biography of Napoleon Bonaparte, a lifelong role model, and Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto in pamphlet form. From Napoleon, I imbibed the politics of power, Zulfi later reflected. From the pamphlet, I absorbed the politics of poverty. We used to kid him and ask him if he was a Brahman, Joe Phillips recalled, and he just laughed and said, of course, he liked Miller's Draught Beer and Old Beer. He watched his diet a lot, though Zulfi had a good time. After 2 years at USC, in June of 1949, Zulfi moved to Berkeley in a house Alston Way. Pilo did the cooking, Yadu Kaul and Madhav Prasad washed the dishes. Zulfi made the beds, and Asif Karambhoy and Edward Menon were supposed to clean the house. Inder Chabra and Brij Mohan Thapar later moved in. We had communal cooking. Nobody was fussy. We all pitched in money for groceries. Inder reminisced. Zulfi was always politically minded, a born political animal, very intense, very pro-Jinnah, pro-Pakistan. Berkeley political scientist Leo Rose, a classmate of Zulfi's at the time, remembers that he dated a lot of girls, was very bright, and loved Professor Hans Kelsen and international law. Kelsen had recently published his Oliver Wendell Holmes lectures as Law and Peace in International Relations, 1942, and his most famous texts, The General Theory of Law and State, 1949. He was called by some the jurist of our country and had disciples at the UN as well as in Berkeley. Kelsen's value-free science of the law and his oft-reiterated question, what is justice, appealed to Zulfi's passionate nature and fascination with international affairs. Kelsen's legal relativism focused on most major questions relevant to international law: the justice of freedom, the justice of peace, the justice of democracy, the justice of tolerance. An Austrian Jewish refugee from Hitler, Kelsen championed democratic freedoms as the surest key to justice. His mentor's wisdom and brilliance sparked Zulfi to probe more deeply in sources that held no simple answers, no formula solutions to problems central to political power in the post-war world of swiftly changing alliances and realities. For the rest of his life, Zulfi Bhutto would remember what Kelsen had taught, often quoting him in debates on the Pakistan Constitution and in speeches before the UN General Assembly, and finally in his 3-day defense statement during his last public appearance before Pakistan's Supreme Court. The only course Pilo and Zulfi took together was a graduate class in the history of political philosophy, taught by Professor Lipsky. They started with Socrates and Plato's Republic and continued through Hume and Locke to modern times, trying to formulate some theory of international relations. Pilo recalled that a keen competition soon developed between old friends, each of whom hoped to become Prime Minister of his home country. Zulfi wrote at this time, reflecting on his own feelings, no doubt, as well as one of Lipsky's lectures. What is the disease that makes an animal of a man on a Monday, glorifies him on the following day, turns him into a barbarian on a Wednesday, inspires him to become a messiah on a Thursday, draws forth from him a glimpse of Plato on a Friday, makes him display a streak of Machiavelli on the Sabbath? There are those that hate you, those that hate me, and those that dislike our philosophies. The day for my domination is still to come. Zulfi returned home for his sister's wedding in September 1949. Stopping over in New York, he invited his USC friend Salman, the Turk, to dinner at the Raja restaurant, and the following evening they shared a Turkish meal together. They talked all evening about everything from pan-Islamism to import regulations, from the nostalgic memories of glittering Los Angeles to the Young Turks' revolution, from geology to the morals of American women. About midnight, the head waiter asked them to lead. They loitered about aimlessly, walked into a movie, out they came at 3:30 in the morning. The city was half dozing, yet alive. Erect, masculine skyscrapers standing undistributed and unaffected by the events that went on inside them. They seemed to be terribly human, soaring with emotion. It was a strange feeling, the strangest I have felt. Suddenly their character changed. The mask was withdrawn. They began to symbolize something magnificent, the elevation of man. I wondered if they had become uncontrollable monsters. I imagined they were capable of plotting against their own creator, called man. I almost shouted and rebuked the tall stone structures, calling them ungrateful, at the same time knowing full well that I had made them. They were a source of pride to me. People in primitive times were hospitable and simple. Now they are cold and aloof and complex. I went on thinking till I staggered into my room. Zulfi, of course, had had too much to drink that night, yet, even given his intoxication, his half hallucinatory description of terribly human skyscrapers soaring with emotion is startling in what it reveals about the state of his mind and the ubiquitous polarity of his passions and feelings. As soon as the phallic monsters were unmasked, they became uncontrollable and started plotting against their own creator, who was none other than Zulfi himself. Knowing full well that I had made them, they were a source of pride to me, yet cold and aloof, as were the people in this city of strangers, where weary head waiters ordered him to leave restaurants, and lovely women he smiled at or spoke to warmly were too often cold and aloof, not hospitable and simple, like the women of Larkana or Karachi perhaps. Zulfi's ambivalence towards New York reflected all the polarities he felt about the United States, which had at once warmly welcomed, yet coolly rejected him, giving him love, education, and hospitality on one hand, dished up with doses of racial prejudice, mistrust, and indifference on the other. He would never reconcile those feelings. Zulfi's love hate relationship with the United States was to remain unresolved. New, uncontrollable monsters of suspicion looming in his mind till his last days. That afternoon, Zulfi flew home to Karachi, where his family eagerly awaited the prodigal. Manna's marriage to Mr. Islam was a splendid affair, a gala wedding followed by a 3 days and nights of parties, luncheons, dinners, celebrations, and exchanges of gifts and greetings by both families, each visiting the other's homes, forging new alliances, finding potential brides and grooms for future family weddings. The first time I saw him was when I had gone to my bank to take out some of my jewelry to wear for the wedding. Zulfi's widow Begum Sahiba Nusrat Bhutto recollected. We kept our jewels in the safe deposit vault. I went to sign and I saw Manna's mother and a man, a boy, standing in front of me. They wanted to take out some jewels also for the wedding. So his mother said, "Oh, hello, how are you, Nusrat?" She said to the son, "Oh, here, meet Nusrat, who is Manna's friend." And she told me, "This is my son who came." Zulfi. Nusrat Isfahani was one of Karachi's most beautiful debutantes. Her Kurdish Iranian parents had migrated to Bombay, where she was born on 23rd March 1929. Her two much older sisters had been born in Iran and were more like surrogate mothers to her, pampering young Nusrat. Her father had founded Bombay's Isfahani soap factory, which soon exported such large quantities of soap to Iraq that he later changed its name to the Baghdad Soap Factory. A clever, energetic, enterprising man, he was the first Indian soap manufacturer to make samples of his merchandise, distributing them free of charge in villages in Maharashtra and Gujarat, winning customers wherever he went. Early in 1947, as Hindu-Muslim communal riots intensified, several Bombay Iranian friends were killed, convincing Nusrat's father that it was time to sail to Karachi. The family moved into the Grand Palace Hotel, now the Sheraton, in the heart of Pakistan's fastest growing city, which was destined to become the nation's capital. Sir Haji Harun and Lady Harun invited them to stay at their palatial home, and within a few months, Isfahani had bought a place at 23 Clifton, the main residential road leading from the heart of Karachi to the seashore. Nusrat's father started a silicate of soda factory in Karachi and was able to rebuild his soap business without too crippling a financial loss. Nusrat joined the Pakistan Women's National Guard, was good at martial drill, and soon learned to drive trucks and ambulances. A tall, slender, dark beauty, she was promoted to captain with silver pips on her shoulders. One of her best friends, Marie Habibullah, General Habibullah's wife, had glimpsed Zulfi before Nusrat did and reported to her on the eve of Manna's wedding, "She's got a very handsome brother." So he looked and I looked at him. Nusrat reminisced about her first meeting in the bank, and to me, he didn't look very handsome or dashing that first moment. So, in my mind, as I said, I must tell my friend, "Why did you say he's handsome? He's not at all handsome." Of course, later on, I thought he was very handsome and I loved him. They met again at his sister's wedding, and Zulfi just looked at me and said, "Hello," and went away. Nusrat recalled thinking him shy, but during the reception he kept dancing with me and tried to hold me tight. And I said, "This is Pakistan, it's not America," to which Zulfi laughed, obviously taken with this new beauty, who looked Pakistani but sounded cold and aloof. The reception was held at the Central Hotel, and before the buffet ended, Zulfi asked if he could drive Nusrat home. She explained that she had her own car and driver waiting and wouldn't think of going with him alone. Sounding deflated by her response, he asked if she would like an ice cream. She refused. "Don't you know who I am?" he irately asked. "I've come for the holidays." She pretended to have thought he was his brother, but he could see she was just fibbing, so he sat down beside her and became more keenly interested as he looked at her beautiful face and warm eyes. I got to know her when we started acting in the National Guard, arranging a variety of programs for the Red Cross. Nusrat's friend Hushmat Habibuddin, the charming niece of Pakistan's second Governor General, Bengali Khwaja Nazimuddin, 1894 to 1964, recollected. They went to rehearsals together. Hushmat's father, Khadesha Habibullah, was the Minister of Refugees and Rehabilitation in Liaquat Ali Khan's cabinet, a very open-minded man, much more liberal than most of his contemporaries. Begum Liaquat Ali, who was another Iranian beauty, asked Hushmat's uncle, "I want my guards to swim. Can they use the Governor General's pool?" Nusrat and her sister Zinat also came to the government house to swim, and sometimes they would leave their jewelry in the aide-de-camp's room and come back again for it. The army ADC was especially tall and handsome, and being a tall lady, Nusrat was also interested in him. Though Hushmat would marry him, the now retired Brigadier Noor Hussain of Rawalpindi. 2 days after Manna's wedding, Zulfi arranged for a married friend's wife to invite Nusrat to dinner at one of Karachi's best restaurants. Nusrat found Zulfi waiting with their chaperones, and before the evening ended, he complained of how difficult it would be to rack my brains to find other married friends they both knew whenever he wanted to see her. Then he proposed to me, and I took it as a joke, Nusrat recalled. She knew that in a week or two he would return to Berkeley to complete his degree. He would neither forget nor retract his proposal, however. Distance and time served only to strengthen Zulfi's resolve to make the lovely cosmopolitan Iranian lady his second Begum. Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan. His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 3, Brief California Interlude, 1947 to 1950. Upon his return to Berkeley, Zulfi launched his political career, running for the representative at large seat on the Student Council, the only foreign candidate in the field of 7. His populist platform called for more complete integration of foreign students in student affairs, opposition to the California Loyalty Oath, a product of the Cold War, witch hunt mentality, then sweeping the United States, and a fair bear. A bear is Berkeley's symbol as it is California's. Minimum student wage of $1 an hour. Zulfi was in his element, badgering all his friends to work very hard, in Pillow's words. Zulfi Bhutto became the first Asian member of the council. 40 years later, Chang Lin Tien would be appointed the university's first Asian-born chancellor. Zulfi's growing political consciousness and liberal democratic ideals were given expression the following year when he volunteered in the 1950 campaign of Democrat Helen Gahagan Douglas for a seat in the U.S. Senate against Republican Richard M. Nixon. It was during that infamous campaign that Nixon was first duped Tricky Dick. Unfortunately, Zulfi learned more about the kind of politicking later employed from Nixon's deplorable tactics that fall than he did from his contact with the more principled losing candidate for whom he worked. On the evening of his departure from California for England in the fall of 1950, Zulfi reflected on what he learned to live by a profitable absence of scruples if we are able to be successful politicians. We have to do what others do to us, but we must do it before the others have the opportunity. These were Machiavellian lessons he would soon apply in every corridor of political power he entered in Pakistan. We have also seen the tragedies of Jim Crowism in Lincoln's America, Zulfi noted ambivalently, concluding, "We have seen the warmth and tenderness of the citizens of this great democracy, and we have seen the crass and naked discrimination against a certain sect of people." Zulfi continued dating Nattily during weekends in Berkeley, whenever she flew up from Los Angeles. He had another special girlfriend in addition to his many one-nighted dates in the Bay Area, Caroline. She wrote regularly to him at Oxford for more than a year, late in 1951. "It has been obvious to me for quite some time, long before your last letter, that the feeling you once had for me is quite dead. It strikes me as being rather ironical that you were the one to change your mind." The same Zulfi that worried so about the sincereness and durability of my love for him. Perhaps it is for the best, for the problems we would have had to face most surely would have been great ones. I would rather not have my cross back. Keep it for when you are old and can do no more. Then reflect. You can remember how once you captured the heart of an American girl. Although Zulfi is perfectly capable of using people to gain his own ends, Pillow noted, in trying to evaluate the character of his best friend, he is almost as willing to allow others, and particularly his friends, to use him even when he realizes it. The candor with which Zulfi can admit having tried to fool someone and failed is what ultimately induces people to trust him. He normally sought approval from his friends about the way he looked. Even his casual appearance was studied. As to speech, he would revel in language and concentrate on effects, and when necessary would exaggerate and overstate a proposition. This was also for effect. Zulfi was ever the master of rhetoric, uniquely able to bring huge crowds to a fever pitch of emotion. He excelled, moreover, in the art of sarcasm, even having bars at his closest friends, including Pillow Moody. Zulfi called himself a socialist during his last year at Berkeley, reading Harold Lasky's Grammar of Politics, as well as the works of Marx and Engels, and such Fabians as Jawaharlal Nehru, who was one of his early heroes and long a political role model in several respects. He was always a militant advocate of Pan-Islam, nationhood for Palestinian Arabs, freedom from French rule for Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, and independence of Vietnam. The Student Council was a forum in which he tried to educate fellow students on important contemporary issues. Zulfi was confident of his destiny, a leader of Pakistan, a world statesman. He viewed the UN as yet another larger forum for his most advanced ideas in international affairs, and was ready even in his early 20s to take a stand there. He would lead not only his countrymen but all Muslims indeed, the entire third world, towards a bright socialist future that carried no trace of Western domination. We are not brute iconoclasts of systems. Honours graduate Zulfi Bhutto wrote as he was about to leave for Oxford. Despite some of our disturbed thoughts, in the space of 3 breezy years, we have grown to love this country, our university, and the many other fine and attractive facets of this immense continent. We are deeply in love with the great good that we have seen all around us. Above all, we shall desperately miss the people, the cute waitress Susie, the saucy Caroline, and the many other wonderful friends. The nostalgia was followed by his vision of the world and its dominant pattern of change, linked to his destiny as a leader. The peoples of the world are becoming more outspoken and vehement about putting an end to all the vestiges of destruction and carnage. We have had enough of destructions of our Londons, Berlins, and Stalingrads. Let us therefore unite in thought and purpose and be the harbingers of a lofty ideal, the salvation of mankind. Let us learn not to think only in terms of America, Anglo-Saxon or Protestant, but in terms of world harmony and cooperation. Then only can we avoid the harlotry of the past and the suspicions of the uncertain future.